Hi, I'm Stefan, the BMW DIY guy, and do you want to change the downpipes on your BMW M2, M3, or M4? I'll show you how. All right, so let's talk about this project a little bit before we do it and the reasons why you're going to want to do this yourself. Now, the best part of this project is going to work for 3 different models because they all have the S58 motor. That's the new BMW M2, M3, or M4 because they all have similar components. Now, we're going to be installing the Mad Design Fat Boy downpipes today. These are catless. This is a great way to add a little bit more power, reduce back pressure into your turbos, and is a relatively straightforward project that I'm going to walk you through. In addition, their Fat Boy pipes are also a full 3-inch pipe all the way through. So if you've changed your exhaust or changed your crossover pipe to 3-inch pipes, this is a great way to match it all the way through your entire exhaust line. All right, so I'm going to walk you through this. Now, don't forget, everything you need will be listed in the video description below, from links to the product, the tools you need, torque values, all of that. Now, the last thing I'm going to say before we get started, my car's not in the air yet. You'll definitely need to put your car up in the air. I always say this every project where we jack our car up. Please do it in the safest way possible. You can do it with jacks and jack stands, be on a hard level surface. Make sure to use jack stands. Don't bet your life on a 50-cent part. I'm a big fan of Quickjacks. It's what I'm going to be using today, and I think is one of the best, quickest, easiest, safest ways to do this kind of work. All right, but we're going to start under the hood, so let's get going there. Before we put the car in the air, there's a couple of things we have to do here underneath the hood. Because we have to get to our sensors and our cables where they're plugged in back here for our O2 sensors, we're gonna have to take our strut bar off. We're gonna have to take your left intake out. Obviously, I'm not stock factory anymore, but we'll talk about it because it's similar in this case. Now, in my case, I've got a little bit of a different bolts, but let's speak to what it would look like if you had the OEM. If you had the OEM, you have a 13mm bolt right here in the front. You have a 13 here on the outside and 15s on the outside. Same thing in the rear, because what you want to do is you want to take the front V-brace off and the cross brace off. So go ahead and take those out, and then we're going to pull our engine cover as well, just so we've got lots of extra room there. And we're going to walk through taking the left intake out potentially as well. Now, if you have an OEM intake, it's going to sit in the way, and you want extra room because we're going to be moving our overflow reservoir right here. In my case, I may not need to take my intake out because it's a little bit smaller in space, but I'll walk you through that once we get there. So start by taking your V-brace off. That's that 13mm bolt here in the front. Go ahead and take your nuts off on either end and pull that off and pull your engine cover off. All right, so you can see the cover's off. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to be moving the expansion tank so we can get down to all of our connections for all of our O2 sensors underneath all of this. So first thing you want to do is just pinch and release and pull this plug off. There's a little expanding rivet right here. You can use a plastic trim tool or something similar to get that loose. Feed the cable out of the little track right here and lift up on this and pinch off. And then all of that connections will come loose. Okay, so that's good to go. Now the only thing that's holding your tank on is the top of the bracket right here. I've got different bolts in here because of my bolt kit. So I believe, if I remember correctly, they were 10mm bolts. So go ahead and take both of these bolts out, and then your expansion tank should be loose, and you can kind of take it and pull it forward and up and out of the way. If I have to, I'm going to take my intake out. Right here on the OEM is a clamp similar to this. So you undo the worm drive, and then you can take the top of the box out. You can pull the bottom of the box out because it's on rubber feet down below. You can potentially take that out as well to get all this additional space. I'll take this out if I have to, but I just wanted to explain what the OEM would look like. We're going to take this off next. So I'm going to pull both of these bolts, and then your expansion tank should be loose. Now keep in mind, you have all these feed hoses still on it, so don't crank on this, because the last thing you'd want to do is break one of your feed hoses, especially this front one being kind of a little bit more rigid plastic. We're just trying to gain a little bit of room. All right, so as you can see, the reservoir is up and out. I actually just used a bungee cable just to pull it up and hold it up out of the way, because I don't want to put too much stress on my pipes, but I do want it out of the way so I can get back here, back in the back. So now you have a series of cables that is attached to this bracket right here, and this bracket has 2 reverse Torx bolts, one right here and one back here in the back right there, because we're going to want to get this bracket off. So we have to get the cables off. So this back one, you just press on it, it'll come up and out of the clip. This middle one as well, right here, it locks in. So you're just going to use something like a screwdriver or something similar to prop that little flange free right there to get that out. Then you can pull the cable out as well out of your positive post right here. And then lastly, you have your O2 sensor cables right here, also in a little clip. There's a little bracket that comes around, holding onto these cables. So you just want to very gently pull that clip open and push both cables out. Once all of your cables are off this bracket, we can take it off. And it's a little reverse Torx right here and right here in the back. I'll have the size for you just here in a moment, but go ahead and get your cables free. All right, so a couple of things trying to make this a little bit easier. As you can see, my bracket is kind of pulled up and away because what we're trying to get to is the top O2 sensor, which is right here. I can put my hand on it very easily now. So when we look at this, the bracket itself is still attached back here in the back, but I don't see a reason to take that off if you can just pull it up and out of the way. In addition, your front and rear O2 sensors here, the black and the gray, also are on a little clip back here that you can just barely see that I reached back there and just pulled them free. Now, as you can see, we can get down to our top O2 sensor right here, which is really, really easy. So I don't see any reason to take this bracket off entirely. It's going to make it easier to put it back on because it's still attached to the positive post wiring runs right here. Okay, so now we're going to get right here. We're going to get to our top O2 sensor next. Okay, so now as far as that top O2 sensor, it traces all the way up and is plugged in here, right here at the top. We're going to pull that here in a second. But this is where you are going to need a basically O2 sensor socket. This fits around the cable. It's a 22 millimeter socket. This fits on, and then you can fit in a wrench. Now in this case, let me see if I can do this here for you real time. Take this and fit this around, down and around the cable, through the slot in the socket, and then down onto the O2 sensor, just like that. Okay? Now in this particular case, there is just enough room that I was able to fit a wrench in and then pull up. It's 50 Newton meters of torque, which is not a huge amount, so you should be able to do it with a wrench. Don't rack your knuckles into the motor right here, just to break that free. Now, I've gone ahead and actually broken the O2 sensor free, so it's loose at this point, which is great. So then I can just simply back it out. Now, whenever we do all this work, be really careful with your O2 sensors. They're not cheap to replace. And so when you pull them out, you want to be very, very gentle with them. So pull it out safely aside. Now, the other thing you want to do is note which cable is which. So if you notice in this case, you have a dark gray and a light gray cable right here. The dark gray is the top. So you can also take this opportunity to go ahead and unplug it from here. We're going to pull it off this clip and unplug it, and then we're going to take the front O2 sensor out and set it aside. Once you have the O2 sensor unplugged, make sure that the back part of the plug is off the clip right here and you feed it down and around that bracket, and go ahead and take the O2 sensor out and set it very safely aside. While you're here, you might as well unplug the back one, which is the light gray cable right here. Same thing, you pull the little tab on the clip and you press on it, and then the plug will come off. This plug slides forward to come off its bracket, and now it's free as well. And you can just take this and just let it go ahead and drop down out of this clip and down below, because we're going to be feeding it back up once we take the rest off here in a second. But go ahead and just take this cable, feed it back down, because it'll come out once we take the downpipes out themselves. We have one more O2 sensor, the top O2 sensor for the other downpipe that we want to get set up. So you'll see it is, again, the gray cable for the top goes through the clip right here, and you can actually see it down there. Now, if you have one of the special socket tools that goes straight down, you can fit it straight down onto that pipe, and then put your wrench in the top of the socket and it'll turn it. Mine is offset, so I can't fit mine in there. It's a 22 millimeter socket. Now, and also as I reach from underneath, my long 22 millimeter wrench won't reach that very easily. But we've got a way of doing this. Basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna feed this out with that O2 sensor in place. So what we wanna do is unclip the wire from here, unclip the wire from here, and go ahead and unplug it right here. So when we take that entire downpipe out, we're going to feed the whole thing out with the O2 sensor in place, and then we'll take it off once the pipe is out. Okay, so go ahead and get that unplugged so when we get underneath, we can take it out. All right, so at this point that we're done at the top, go ahead and put your car up in the air, and we're going to walk through taking off some of the lower body plastics and the stiffening plate so we can get to the downpipes. All right, y'all. So here we are underneath the car looking from the driver's side. Now, again, I've got a little bit of differences from the changes I've made, but I'll speak to it as if it was OEM. Now, you're going to have a whole series of some body plastics that you're going to need to take off to be able to get to the stiffening plate, which is our big piece right here. Okay, so you have a plastic skid plate here. You've got a front brace here. So these are lots and lots and lots of 10 millimeter screws. You want to take this front lip off first right here. So these are 10 millimeters that go all the way down. I have some slightly different bolts because of what I've done with my add-ons, but 10 millimeters to take this front C-shaped plastic off right here. Okay, then your plate around, your protective plate around your oil cooler also has a whole series of 10 millimeters all the way around. So you can drop this piece off and this piece off. Once those are off, slide back to the back side of the stiffening plate here, and you're gonna have these kind of long L-shaped plastic pieces here. These are also a whole series of 10 millimeters. Now here's where you might have a little bit of fitment problem, and I find that a 10 millimeter flat ratcheting wrench works really well. So it's one of the rare times when my Quickjacks are in the way, because the very back corner of this has a couple of screws that help hold this piece in place, and they're back covered by this right now, but you can actually get into them. But they all make sense. So you can see here, 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 as these go around to pull these out. So you're going to want to pull these out on both sides. So there's one on this side and one on this side. So go ahead and take a whole series of those off. Now, the one other thing you want to do while you have your 10 millimeter socket out is you also have here and here holding plastics to your stiffening plate, and that will be on both sides. So go ahead and use something like an impact wrench because it makes it faster and easier. Rip out all of these 10 millimeters. Start with this kind of C-shaped plastic in front. Take your oil cooler guard off. Take those two back pieces off, and then we can get the stiffening plate off to get up to the downpipes. All right, so once you have all your perimeter plastics off, and if you have a situation like I did where you've got two 10 millimeters that are partially covered and kind of a pain to get off on that back plastic right there, what I'll normally do is I'll get them off. It's even harder to put them on. I'll just wait to put them on until the car's back on the ground, because you can put all of that back wing plastic back on, minus those two screws that might be fouled by your jack or your Quickjacks. So once the car's on the ground, it's the very last thing I do is put those back in on both sides. So quick tip. Now, these are 16 millimeter bolts. So go ahead and take these out. What I'll normally will do is I'll take the back wings out. You got two back in the back corners. So go ahead and use an extension and a wrench. I usually do these by hand, just so I get a good feel of them and they're coming out cleanly. And then I'll start taking out, leaving just the outside perimeter, like 1, 2, 3, 4. Until I'm down to the two middle two here and here, which will hold the stiffening plate in place, because I'm doing this by myself and underneath the car. And this is moderately heavy, so I'll take all the perimeter out to work my way to the inside. Those will help hold the plate up. And then once you get these last two, you'll drop it down and slide it out from underneath the car. All right, so go ahead and take all these 16 millimeter bolts out. All right, so here we are underneath. We're gonna start loosening up the downpipes so we can get them taken out, but we have to separate them away from both the crossover pipe and your mid pipe for your exhaust. Now, keep in mind, I have an aftermarket exhaust and crossover pipe, so they're gonna look a little bit different than what you're used to, but these are 13 millimeter nuts here and here, here and here, and here and here. There's also a bracket right here on the back side that's two 13 millimeter nuts, and you can drop your mid pipe away and you can start to separate this away. Now, the BMW guide actually recommends taking your entire exhaust line off. I don't see a reason to do that unless you really want to, and I'm not sure why you would. So we're gonna take the crossover pipe off and we're gonna sag this. So as need be, there's the bracket right here, which is another 13 millimeter nut, and we're going to sag the mid pipe away from your front downpipe right here. But in the interim, go ahead and take these off. Then we're gonna start loosening up our O2 sensors, and we're gonna get these down. So what I've done in my case, because I've got aftermarket mid pipes that can separate, I've actually pulled the mid pipe here on the passenger side, the longest mid pipe, to make it easier so you can actually see what we're doing. Okay, you don't necessarily have to. What you can do without dropping your entire exhaust line, if you have the OEM exhaust, is as you detach your crossbody pipe here, and you'd have one header on this side, and then you'd have the top of your mid pipe, your OEM mid pipe on this side, it's all going to be really securely in place. So what you can do is if you undo the body post right here, or undo that, and you work your way down the body, you can actually separate a couple of the hangers and then sag the entire exhaust line down. Now, BMW recommends dropping the entire exhaust line. I'm not going to show that because it's not applicable in this case because of my aftermarket components. But let me at least point it out here really quick if that's what you're going to do. So you would pull the hanger on this side, you would pull the hanger here. As you come down the body, you're going to want to take your crossbody brace off. These are 13s, three on each side, 1, 2, 3, 3 on each side. You've got mid-body hangers here that you pull down, and then you'd come all the way to the back. You'd unplug your valves at the top and undo the top hangers here, and then you can drop your entire exhaust line. It's not that hard. Obviously, I'm not going to do it in this case for obvious reasons. I wanted you to be able to see, so I took off the mid-body pipe on this side, but you can drop the entire exhaust line. If you want to sag it, you basically pull everything down. You can leave the mid-body brace on and then pull off the connections here at the top, this post, the post that's right here, or excuse me, the nut that's right here, and then you can drop and the whole thing will sag away. Though you do want to support it. I usually use the crossbody brace. I leave that on to help support the exhaust line so it's not putting too much weight on those hangers. All right, so let's work back up here. Next thing we're going to be doing is unplugging our lower O2s. Let me show you what that looks like. All right, so let's start with the longer of your downpipes. So it's also the one that's the lower one and covers up the top one, so it's got to come out first. So you can see your lower O2 sensor right here. You can easily get to that 22 without your special socket. You can use a 22 millimeter wrench to undo that. And then the O2 sensor has a clip right here, and it goes through, and you can see the plug right down there where it plugs in. So go ahead and unplug that and take out this O2 sensor, and then we're going to drop the downpipe next. Okay, so once you have the rear OT sensor off here, off the longer of your downpipes, go ahead and loosen this one. You can actually slide the heat shield up ever so slightly to get your tool into place, and then get your wrench on it and turn it. Mine's already broken loose. So you can see how you can get that up to separate the heat shield up a little bit to get enough room to get your tool on. Now, if you also look up here, this rear O2 sensor actually has two clips. One right here that my hand is in the way right at the moment. You'll see one, and you'll see a second up a little bit higher. So make sure to pull this loose of both those clips. Then you can take this O2 sensor out and set it aside. Now, it would be hard to mix them up, but be very careful that you don't. So the rear O2 sensor here for your longer downpipe is shorter. The rears are gray. The cable is gray. So here, the passenger side one essentially is the shorter of the two. The driver's side one, or the shorter pipe, is the longer one that goes all the way up above that we've fed down, right? So go ahead and take this out, and then we're going to be taking the downpipes out next. So next up is the V-band clamp, which is the top clamp right here, holding the longer of your two downpipes, the passenger side of the downpipes. This is a 13 millimeter bolt that you can back off. And this clamp is usually will stick down like it's completely closed when you first undo this bolt. So then you just pop it. You can use like a screwdriver and just get it to pop loose. Now, the one thing, it's going to be a little bit hard to see, but right here is a stripe on the V-band and a little arrow right here on the turbo indicating right where the proper alignment for your V-band. Your other one has the same that you can see, and actually you can get to that V-band from the top, but this one from the bottom. So when we put these back on, you're going to want to make sure to line up your V-band with that little arrow indicator here on the turbo. Okay, so go ahead and take this off. Now, I have reused V-bands. BMW recommends replacing them. I've reused them, especially if your car is relatively new, and like it is in my case, I have no problem reusing them, but I'll also have the part numbers for the V-bands, and actually these gaskets as well, here and here. I'll have them in the descriptions if you want to renew your gaskets and renew your V-bands. All right, so go ahead and undo the V-band, and we're going to start popping your downpipes loose. Okay, so I want you to see this in a partially done position so this just makes sense. I've undone both V-bands, so you undo the V-band on the longer pipe first, spread that out, and then the pipe will drop down and is just resting on suspension. That will give enough space here for the back downpipe to come out. So again, you reach up, you undo that 13 millimeter bolt, you back the bolt out, you spread the V-band, and then this will drop out. Now be careful, because it might want to just drop out on its own. It half dropped out as soon as I got it away. Now you can also see that there's a gasket up there at the very top against the turbo. Since this is a new car, I'm not going to worry about renewing those gaskets on either turbo. They should be fine. But so you can feed the shorter downpipe out, and then you can just easily feed this out. I just wanted to leave it in place so you'd see what it looks like. So I'll get this out, and then we're going to be working to reinstall the new downpipes. All right, so here we are with the new pipes laid out, and obviously I still have that upper O2 sensor, remember, because we couldn't get to it because of the tool that I have wouldn't reach it, but we can easily feed it down into place. So we're going to be transferring that back. Now also remember, the very end of this plug, if you remember correctly, went between the branches on the turbo, and I'll show you exactly what I mean when we feed this back in, but we want to install that cable in the exact same position as it was when it came out. But so this is how it all goes back together. So you can see that the new system has bolts. So what you are going to want to do is transfer your gaskets. So I've got a gasket on the shorter here that I'm going to transfer over. The gasket on this side transferred over if it was still there. I think it's sitting on my mid pipe right now. This is why sometimes you do want to renew these gaskets. Okay, so I'm going to transfer the O2 sensor over here to the new one, and then we're going to set up the new pipes to get them installed. So go ahead and transfer that O2 sensor. Now, again, if you have a tool that fits from up above, you can reinstall it from above when we're done. I'm going to need to feed the cable back upwards. So what I'm going to use is probably a little bit of string, drop it down in the path that I want to get to, tie it to that plug and pull it back up once you get it back in. But while it's out of the car, make sure to transfer the gaskets. So I've got the end gasket here, and I'm going to transfer the end gasket to the new pipe there. I've got my O2 sensor in, and I'm ready to reinstall. So go ahead and get those gaskets swapped over, and then we're going to get back underneath the car, and we're going to get both of these installed into the car. All right, y'all, so here we are back underneath, and we're going to lay the longer pipe in first, and then we're going to fit the upper pipe back in. And what I will usually do is I'll take the V-band and I'll hang it open. I'll have the bolt out, and I'll hang it open over the back of the turbo so it's easier to fit in, because as you can see, it's grooved. So there's a flange on the turbo and a flange on the downpipes, and this needs to go around that flange. So what I will normally do is I will fit the pipe up, fit the V-band into place, and then squeeze it, and generally it'll hold pretty well. Now keep in mind, remember, you've got those marks like that one right there that lines up with the marks on the turbo to show the exact position of the V-band. The other thing I wanted to point out is you can see my yellow cable there. That's the path that the plug for the sensor, that upper sensor, is going to go. So I just put that in here, and it's hanging down here where I can reach it to remind me to feed that up, and that'll help me feed the plug for my sensor back up into the correct space. Okay, so lay the longer pipe in. If you've already installed the front sensor, go ahead and feed that cable up, and then rehang the top one and put that V-band into place. Once that's done, I will get that done. Now, one quick side note before we start putting this all back together is I have spacers on my lower O2 sensors. Now, this is an off-road or track car. Spacers are only legal for off-road or track cars because I don't want to get a check engine light. Check engine lights just irritate me, and spacers on your lower O2 sensor will help you avoid that unless you're running a tune where you can manipulate that check engine light. So you'll see when I reinstall, I'll have spacers on the lower O2 sensor position. I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. Okay, so we're going in reverse order, putting it back in. So I take this longer pipe, feed it in, and make sure to feed the O2 sensor cable up in between the branch, of the turbo intakes up above where it came down, which is why I was using this strap as indication. I mentioned that. So I fed that cable up. So it's all the way up in the upper position where it needs to be, and I use this cable to pull it up. So then I just simply lay this in place with the V-band around the collar of the turbo. Take this one, feed it up in, hang it with the V-band. So you can see the V-band all the way up there at the top. And the V-bands, this is much easier to do in the S58 than it was the S55. There's just more room. So you can get your hand in a good spot right here, and you can reach up and you can hang on to the V-band. there's an inner ring on your downpipes. So you fit it in until that inner collar fits in really nice and snug. And you can tell when the V-band is straight. So you fit it and you can tell when it's around both flanges, because you'll be able to squeeze the V-band almost shut with just your hand. That will help hold it in place, and then drive in the screw just finger tight for now. Once this one is in place, then I hang this one. I fit it up against the collar, kind of fit it all into place with the V-band finger tight. I fit it around those flanges and screw that in. Now I wanted to make sure that it's just finger tight, so I've got a little bit of where I can move it. See where I can still twist it a little bit? Because we're going to bring it down into alignment with our mid pipe and our crossover pipe here in just a second. And since we can get to those nuts on the V-bands, those bolts on the V-bands so easily, then they're just going to be finger tight for now with those marks right where the arrows are on the turbo, so they're straight. But that way we can get all of our exhaust components in line really easily and then tighten it down. So the other thing I've done is, you see that these actually come with their own bolts. I reversed them. So I've put the bolt head on the back side with the bolt coming through with the nut hanging off the front. That's going to be easier to get to. Plus the opposite orientation is going to make it really hard to work reconnecting your O2 sensor, as you can see right here. Now reminder, when you snug your O2 sensors down, they're 50 Newton meters to snug down. Now I've taken the O2 sensor cable and I've hung it back on that metal clip. If you remember correctly, that's just barely within reach right up there. I've got the end of the cable right here that I'm going to pull up with my strap here in just a second, so it's in the right position. So all really simple, all really straightforward. So I'm going to pull this up just to get it out of the way and make sure that it's in the right place. And then we're going to put our crossover pipe back on. And in my case, my mid pipe section, if you've got the OEM exhaust, you can fit it up into place and put it back on the post right here to help hold it up. And then you can make sure that your downpipes are straight and in the right orientation for your exhaust components, and then you can tighten them all down. Okay, so let's walk through putting it all back together. So we put the crossover pipe on, and initially all of the nuts on I put on very, very loosely, because that way I can make sure that everything is lined up and fits very, very well before I snug it all down. So here and here, the two nuts here, the two nuts on the back of the hanger here, the two nuts here with the new posts, or the new bolts that come through with the new downpipes. Same thing here. Keep in mind that these gaskets, they're not crush gaskets. They're just snug and tight. So do not flush either side of these flanges down flat. That actually crushes that gasket and reduces its capability. You can see the O2 sensors back in, like I said, that we did just before. The other O2 sensors back in here, and I've routed the cable back over, and I've plugged it back in and I've hooked it up. I've put it back on its little clip right here. Once everything is back in place, including your exhaust line, if you have the OEM, rehang it, get it set back up. And in my case, of course, I've hung the mid-pipe piece back up into place, which does make it more convenient, but you really can do this with OEM without having to take the entire exhaust down. So that's all hung up. So once everything is set into place and everything sits really nice and straight, you can start tightening things down. So the first thing that I do is actually I get up to the V-bands up above, which are really nice to reach, the lower and the upper. And when you snug them down, you don't have to crush them, and I don't use a torque value, because there's those little flanges on the end of the V-band. When they come closed, they touch. Because remember when you took them apart, you had to use a screwdriver to pry them apart. So I just tighten them down until those ends touch, and that's good to go. Get those tightened down. Go ahead and get all of the rest of the pipes tightened down. Check all your fitment. Make sure you've got good fitment here in between the two pipes and they're not touching. Make sure that you've got good fitment right back there so that this pipe is not touching as well. It shouldn't, and it's close, but it's not touching. I hate rattles. I hate any noise like that. Make sure that you've got good fitment once you tighten everything down. And at that point, we can put our stiffening plate back on. So remember, it's got those wings that slide in on either side, and then you hang it up with all of those 16mm bolts, and then we'll torque them down. I'll have that for you in just a second. Okay, so once the stiffening plate is back on and all the bolts are in just hand snug right now, they are 56 Newton meters to torque back down. Now, these are stretch bolts, so they're 56 plus 90 degrees. You can choose to reuse your bolts, or you can buy new ones. Most folks that I know just simply reuse them, but if you do want to do new ones because they're stretch bolts, make sure to do that. So get them all torqued down, and then we're gonna put the plastics back on. All right, so keep working your way up the car. All the bolts are torqued down. Now I'm putting these plastic wings back on with the 10mm. Keep in mind, A good impact wrench can make a really big difference. The new Dewalt 20XR is really nice if you're doing repetitive bolts like that. And then also remember those two 10 millimeters that in my case are covered by my Quickjack. I'm just going to get those once the car's back on the ground because they're just a pain to do by hand or try to wiggle your fingers in there. So get that done. Okay, so go ahead and work your way back here to the front of the car. So put your oil cooler guard back on, and it's kind of the same process whether you have an aftermarket like mine or the OEM. The front end slips up through, the front edge slips up here, up back behind where it's going to get connected, and then it fits back up into place. Put all those 10 millimeters all the way around, and then put that C plastic piece back here along this front edge, and we're going to be just about done underneath the car. Okay, one last look here from underneath. With lowering your exhaust line, make sure all your clearance is good and you don't have anything rubbing. I always like to go like this and see if here it hit anywhere. There's always a drag. Make sure you don't have any bolts left over. Now in my case, I've got 4 left over, those 10 millimeter, 2 on each side on those wings that'll get taken care of. And in addition, since we changed here and here and here and here, the bolts, then I've got 4 extra nuts left over. 1, 2, 3, 4 right there. But that's to be expected. Walk your way up the rest. Everything else is torqued down. Everything is put back together. Okay. So with all of that done, go ahead and put your car back on the ground, and we're going to plug everything back in from above. All right, so one of the very first things you want to do up here up top is go ahead and put your O2 sensor back in, back here at the top. You set that aside, route the cable back behind this bracket, remember, because it's going to go into these clips on the back side of the bracket and route up here to the back. So go ahead and get that installed, and we will keep moving on. All right, so let's plug our other 3 O2 sensors back in. So we have the front one that routes up. Make sure to route it through the clips here, here, here. Clip it back in, or plug it back into place here, and make sure that the plug is secure back into the locking tabs. Back here in the back, they only plug in one place, so you really can't get them backwards, but just be careful. So the gray one here in the back, plug it in. Make sure to snap that collar back down so that plug stays tight, just like that. Put it back on its little holy rack. Here, same thing, snap it into place, get it back secure. Route the cables back behind that wiring harness and down, and then you put them back into the middle clip right here. You also have the bracket that we put back on. So those 2 little E7s, the one in the front, the one in the back, remember those go into plastic. I found it easier if I used a magnetic wand to help guide that back bolt in and then screw it back down into place. Don't overcrack them or crack the plastic, that would be a bummer. So now that this frame is back in place, you can take your main power cable right here, push it back down on the clip. There's a little plastic collar that it goes on so you can tell exactly where it's supposed to go. Take your 2 O2 cables, put them back up through this front clip right here. And then the big insulated one right here, bring that arm of the clip back up so it snaps back into place right there and it's held securely. Okay, so now all of those are back into place, and now we can put our reservoir back. So guide the reservoir back over the foot right here, just kind of sits in place. Go ahead and put your 2 bolts back in. Those are 10 millimeters, if I remember correctly, 2 10 millimeter bolts. And you can put everything else back together. This is for your adjustable suspension that goes back in a hole right here. You can see the plastic clip that it goes on right there. I'll get that back in a second. Route the rest of your cabling back around. Plug everything back in. Get it all snapped back into place. This one goes over here. This one goes over here. As we just kind of walk through, get it all plugged back together. Okay, so go ahead and get all of that set. Make sure that all your hoses are still in the right places and intact. And then we'll be putting the air box back in, obviously if the OEM, and we'll walk through the rest. All right, so obviously I didn't take my air box out because of the size and shape gave me room to maneuver. If you have the OEM, you're gonna take that top half and put it back in. If you took the bottom half off, put the feet back into the grommets, put the top half back on, and put the hose clamp here, right here, to secure it back down into place. I didn't need to do that in my case. Okay, double check everything. Make sure that all your cables are routed back into the right place, like this one here. Everything's plugged back in firmly. Check all of your O2 sensors. Make sure that they're routed correctly and they're all set back into the proper place. And that should be good to go. Now, all you need to do now, put your vanity cover back on, put your engine cover back on, and then go ahead and lay your V-braces back in place, and we'll talk about the right torque values and that in just a second. All right, so go ahead and wrap up 56 Newton meters on your center bolt, 28 Newton meters on the back. And then that will be all squared away. So go ahead and check your space, make sure you don't have anything left over. In my case, I've got those 4 10 millimeters I still need to reinstall now that my car's back on the ground. But other than that, I don't have any leftover bolts. You should be all done. Everything's good to go. Well done. Congratulations. And go ahead and clean up and put your tools away. All right, y'all, so all done, so go ahead and clean up and put your tools away. And this really isn't a hard project if you just take it a step at a time, and really only a few simple tools. Reminder on that, all the links and tools you need will be in the video description below, so make sure to check that out. Thank you to Matt for making such a fantastic product. I'm really glad to get these 3-inch fat boy pipes into my car. It's gonna make a difference. Less back pressure onto my turbos. It's gonna change the way my car sounds. I'm really going to enjoy it. And they make a fantastic product that's really pretty straightforward to install. Please make sure to click like and subscribe. It makes a genuine difference to my channel, and I would truly appreciate it as I have a ton of content coming for this and other models, new car reviews, events, you name it. I can't wait to show you. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on my next video.